Joining us, the great survivor of the Connecticut legislature, Brandon McGee, who represents Hartford and Windsor, and got to the legislature the first time on a historic tie primary vote. Welcome. I take it tonight was a little easier.
Yes, compared to my first run. But I got to tell you, facing the cold and all of the thousands of people who were extremely excited to cast their votes today it was worth every moment in the cold weather today.
Were you surprised by how many people came to the polling places instead of casting absentee ballots?
No, actually, I was not surprised. I was actually a bit excited. Can you hear me or no?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yep. Every word.
Okay. I was extremely excited. I know throughout this entire summer, many of the protests and events that have happened throughout the summer, or rather the spring, summer, and now into the fall, folks said, you know what? I am not going to utilize the absentee ballot. I want to go in person and I want to cast my vote and I want to ensure I see that number on the voting machine to ensure that my vote was counted. While there were thousands of people who cast their vote via absentee ballot, there were probably twice as many who stood in lines in the cold weather with lunches. They had their own folding chairs, and it felt really good to see so many people, especially in my district, the 5th Assembly District.
Representative, it appears that the Democratic majority in the House is only going to grow, and perhaps the Senate majority as well. What would you really like to see be a first priority when assuming you all can go back for legislative session? What's kind of top on your list?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I am cautiously optimistic for a lot of my colleagues who had contested races throughout the state. But, you know, I can't help but think about the thousands of people who have been impacted by this pandemic. And as you both know, we're entering another wave of this pandemic. And there are so many things that we've got to focus on. I know you've heard about the almost 1 million people who filed for unemployment. As chair of the Housing Committee, there are so many individuals, homeowners and renters, that are still impacted by this pandemic. And let's not forget our first responders, essential workers, and our young people in our schools. And it's just, you know, at the end of the day, we have to be able to respond to it.
The Housing Committee is going to be an especially important committee in this session of the legislature because we're facing an eviction crisis and in Connecticut. What do you think you can do in the short term and the long term to ease the misery that may cause?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to thank the Lamont administration, our governor, and our commissioner of housing for just being at the forefront of this housing crisis that the state of Connecticut faced well before this pandemic. But listen, we've got to petition and lobby for additional dollars for folks that have experienced hardship. And we've got to invest to ensure that our homeowners are able to pay for their mortgages. But, you know, I represent a district where there are so many people who are struggling to pay their rent. And we've got to figure out how to support them during this pandemic. And I know there's been dollars allocated, but guess what? We're going through this once again, and 1 million people, okay? 1 million people have filed for unemployment. The number has probably gone higher since the last time I checked. And guess what? Those who already were faced with challenges, man, I got to tell you, it's getting harder. So I'll continue to work with our commissioner, our governor, and many of our municipalities to ensure our residents are taken care of with respect to financial dollars to take care of.
A lot of those tenants live in 2 and 3 family houses owned by the landlord who lives in the same space. Is there anything coming for them, for those small landlords who depend on that rental income?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad that you asked. As a homeowner and a landlord of a two-family, it is nothing but by the grace of God that my tenant was able to remain and pay her rent. But there are others who unfortunately are not in the situation that I'm in, and so many residents as well as homeowners have an opportunity to take advantage of resources that are available. Obviously, there's an eligibility process or requirements that you have to have, but the resources are there. And I really encourage you, forgive me for not having that number on hand.
Quite all right. It's a busy,
But
you've had a busy day.
you guys have time to research it, please share with the broader audience that there are resources available. But let me tell you, these elections tonight, I'm praying while I want Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to proclaim victory. We have a while until we know that, but there are so many of my colleagues who I am just like, please, I want to see them on the other side of victory so that we can get back to work in the legislature.
Do you think the Connecticut legislature, pick A or B, takes pride in not emulating the divisiveness that we've been seeing in Washington that has been growing? Or do you think the Connecticut legislature sometimes devolves into that same partisanship? How do you assess the situation at the state capitol?
This is why you are absolutely great at what you do. That's a great question.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Yes, you're going to be asked back.
Yeah, I'd have to say it's both and. I would be extremely naive and remiss if I didn't say that there are some folks who do play the party line. And there are others who, for the most part, we vote bipartisanly to support the people here in the state of Connecticut. You all know how this thing goes. And as a leader, it's important for me, alongside my colleagues, to work across the lines, party lines, to make sure that we're fighting on behalf of the residents here in the state of Connecticut.
Well, Representative Brandon McGee, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have your insights. And of course, after all that flattery, we'll be having you back on Face the Stage very soon.
Thank you so much. You all enjoy your evening, and I'll stay on and watch your next folk who come on.